Welcome, fellow business brokers, to Let's Chat, the show where we talk to professionals around the world that can help us. We talk to some of the best business brokers around the world, CPAs, attorneys, lenders. My name's Jim Parker. I specialize in selling businesses that have gross sales between 1 million and 10 million. Today, we are going to be talking about those situations where you have a good buyer, a buyer that has a lot of experience. However, they may not have a lot of cash on hand, but they do have some money set aside in retirement accounts. And we're going to be talking about how they can access the retirement accounts in order to acquire a business without getting a huge tax penalty. I'm excited to introduce to you guys today, Suzy. How you doing today, Suzy?
Hey, I'm doing great this morning. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Okay, hey, maybe we can start out and maybe you can briefly explain what a ROBS is for the audience who may not be familiar with it. Maybe we just go over the basics.
Sure. I'd be happy to. A ROBS is a structure that allows individuals to access their retirement funds without tax, without penalty, if they're buying, starting, or adding funds to an existing business. My world is mainly folks that are acquiring a business. And for the most part, my clients are going to be using these funds as part of their financing for the business. Generally, folks will use this as their equity injection in a business loan, usually from the SBA, to purchase or acquire a business.
Great. And Suzy,
What it is a self.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Go ahead, Suzy.
It's a self-directed 401k plan. If you know anything at all about self-directed IRAs, this is not that. It's a completely different body of law. Self-directed IRAs are for passive investments, generally in real estate. 401ks are for active businesses. And the body of law that gave rise to 401k plans is the ERISA law of 1974. At that time, as a society, we moved away from grandpa's pension plan and towards 401k plans. And so ERISA tells us what we can and cannot do in our 401k account, our plan. And specifically, Section 408E of ERISA says this. Through a 401k plan, an individual can buy publicly traded stock, like we all typically do. They can also buy privately held stock of an active business that they're an owner-operator in. And that's really the secret sauce in this structure. So we establish a C Corp for the client, and it has to be a C Corp because of the types of shareholders we need to support. We form the second entity, which is the 401k plan for that corporation. What's happening here is the client is adopting our master prototype plan that's being custom tailored for them and their business. We get that in place, and then we guide the client through opening appropriate accounts, one for the corporation, one for the 401k plan. And at this point, their buyer can roll all of a retirement plan, a portion of a plan, multiple plans. More than one person could come together. Maybe the husband and the wife both have retirement funds they want to bring together to this deal. Any combination of that's just fine. But this structure allows them to roll their funds from where it is into the new 401k account using a qualified rollover, plan to plan. So there is no tax, there is no penalty. Now, our guy has got a big wad of money in his 401k account. He's going to do what we all do. He's going to buy stock. Instead of buying stock in Apple or Google or, more to Suzy's point, somebody else's business, this time he's buying stock in his own C Corp. The dollars transfer into that corporate checking account where it's working capital, available for any purpose, to include leveraging against an SBA loan, which is where most of my clients fall.
Suzy, that's
Now that C
fantastic.
Corp is funded and it's ready to go. Yeah, thanks.
That's fantastic. You know, I got to tell you, Suzy, you got to have to get used to me. I cut people off. My audience knows that. I apologize about it. So we're just going to have to deal with it. And Suzy, you've been doing this for what, 20 years, correct?
Yeah, for a long time. I fell into this niche and I just love it here. I am so passionate about Main Street, small businesses.
And you're out of Texas, right?
Yeah, I'm in Houston.
All right, excellent. So, I mean, you know, from what it sounds like, you know, and what you explained, that the biggest benefits from doing a ROBS is to reduce the tax situation when you're pulling out and reduce the penalty situation, correct?
That is the big benefit, right? And that's why most people will access this. You know, earlier in my career, people were using a ROBS because they had no option. right? They didn't have hard savings. In the last year, 2 years, what I'm hearing more and more is people have dollars saved, but they don't want to deploy them.
Hmm.
They want to hang on to that dry powder just in case and prefer using their retirement funds instead of their liquidity to do a deal like this.
Yeah, that's great because and without the ROBS, if you're pulling money out of a retirement account prior to what, 59 and a half, is that the age,
Yes,
59 and a half?
and it's ridiculous, right? So everybody's going to get a 10% penalty if you're not 59 and a half yet. And then we're going to go back to the original number, and that's what you're going to take into your personal income tax return and pay your personal tax rate on that. So for a lot of people, depending on the state, that's a 40, 50, 60% haircut,
Wow.
which you can avoid it completely by using this. And some people don't understand that this is an investment. The 401k plan is investing in the business. They think it's going to be a loan and somehow there's a debt service to it, and there's not. So the debt service would be in, the rest of the financing piece to purchase the business, not for the portion used in the ROBS.
Okay, great. And so, like, what are some of the primary, what are some of the potential risks and pitfalls in doing a ROBS?
It's, critically important when you're doing a ROBS, particularly with an SBA loan, that you maintain compliance. Um, the IRS several years ago came out with a pretty harshly worded statement saying that businesses that were funded with the ROBS failed more frequently than businesses that did not. I was at a national SBA lending conference, and I threw my hand right up in the air, and I hope it doesn't offend your audience. I'm from the South, and I said, "Horse shit, that's not true." Because my clients are older. That's what I attribute to completely. They've been around long enough to have acquired retirement funds. Our clients are very successful in their business. And so the SBA, it was their conference, the head of OIG, their response was, okay, IRS, shows your data. And the IRS, in their big wisdom, said, no. And so SBA said, well, we have a database. Let's look in our database. And that's when they realized there's no box to check, nothing in ETRAN that indicates that a deal coming through the processing center or under PLP lending authority is a ROBS. So they made a lot of changes, things that were put in place to eliminate some of the bad players in the space, which it did, and that was great news. Um, They put a checklist into the SOP for us when there's a ROBS and SBA lending of specifically and exactly what they're wanting to see. And that's easy for us to educate people on. That's one of the things I really like to do, is to explain to lenders what that SBA waiver packet is all about, what it needs to include, and how we go about doing that, gathering that information. So maintaining that compliance, what SBA, once they figured out what they had their arms around, they realized that people were getting into trouble because they weren't maintaining compliance. And they felt
Mm.
like that some providers were not explaining the strings attached to having a 401k plan. And so they felt like the IRS was actually causing people to fail because they were coming back with big fees and penalties because these clients were not maintaining compliance. It's not a difficult task on behalf of the client. We do all of the heavy lifting, and we're consistently doing it so it's easier and easier for the client to provide us just with the least amount of information they have to be able to do the compliance components related to this 401k plan. So the reporting component, any amendments, restatements, and we also provide IRS audit protection on our plan. But that keeping track of that ongoing requirement is critical. There's a real life 401k plan here, and you've got to do things properly when you have a company with a 401k plan. And so we can't skip years of reporting. You can't skip your corporate filings. Things
Hmm.
like that is what's going to get my client into trouble. We do everything in our power to make it a simple, easy process so the client is not having to do very much at all, so we can be very prompt and timely with all of the filings that we do for the clients in our book of business.
Yeah, so it sounds like, so you guys aren't just doing the initial setup, but you guys are, once it's done, and you guys are there to help that buyer through the process for many, many, many years to come, making sure they're staying compliant and with the
We
regulations and
are.
things
We
like that.
really are. And so many of our clients are first-time business owners. And we found that they really needed a lot of help around bookkeeping and accounting. And so that's something that is different than any other provider of the structure that Guidant now provides. We have a bookkeeping and tax vertical. And so our clients can come just bring everything one stop shop if they'd like. Our goal is to help those folks not get a year behind in their books their first year of business.
Right, right, right. And
We all
that's
know how
really,
that can happen.
that's really great that you guys are there. You guys keep up with the compliance issues and doing the paperwork and things like that. Not just because you guys know it and you're experienced and you guys probably could do a lot better than a buyer could do, but you're also there. When you own a business, you've got so many different things you have to worry about. So it's like kind of taking that weight off their shoulders, and
That's
that's
right.
a great
That's right.
situation. And it also sounds like from what you're saying that the industry's kind of grown up a lot over the years.
It has. It really has matured. 2003 is really when all the main providers came out into the space. And I spent a lot of those years with the smallest provider of ROBS plans. And I've been over here to Guidance a little bit over a year and a half now. And it's a lot of fun playing with the big dogs. I promise you that. But my focus has always been in SBA lending, and that's how I met you. Was at a lending conference, and
Right.
I remember calling you based on the attendee list before the show, saying you are the smartest business broker in the whole state of Florida, coming to where all the lenders are for the conference. Little did I know you were a speaker, and that was a great panel, and it was very interesting. I learned a lot.
No, thank you, Suzy. I appreciate that. And you know what I love about you, and every time I talk to you, your passion for doing ROBS, you genuinely have a passion for ROBS, or at least that's how I feel. So I think it's excellent. I love talking to you about it because I can really tell you
I,
do
I
have that
I really
passion.
have a passion for small business, you know. I mean, in 2008, I was newly promoted into my role, and here I am, big, big corporate girl going off on a big business trip to a conference up in Cleveland, Ohio. And it was on alternative forms of financing for small businesses because it was in 2009 that this was taking place. I'm sure our audience remembers how it was in
Yeah,
2009. The
not the best
economy
time.
wasn't that
Not the
great
best
then
time
either.
financially,
Not
right?
at all. Not at all. Not at all. And so at this conference that SBDC and SBA and the folks up there that lead the business brokerage committees put a this event together. They anticipated 200 attendees. 400 people came into the room. They just kept bringing more
Wow.
and more chairs. That's the day I learned that a true entrepreneur will find a way. And I just dig that. I love that. I get chills every time I think about it because it's those men and women up and down Main Street that are driving our economy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it is. It
they're making
really
it
is.
happen.
It's the small business owners
And
out there. They're making this country work. I totally believe that.
it's not Walmart.
Nope.
It's
Nope.
not Amazon.
Yeah, it's a small
It's our
business
mom
owner.
and pop shops. It absolutely is.
You,
So yeah, I have a real passion for that.
I think that's excellent. Susie. So, like in my industry, as a business broker, well, we're in related industry, but as a business broker, when I'm talking to a seller, I'm talking to a buyer, I kind of feel like one of the most critical things that I can do in the process is continuing to educate the seller and the buyer as much as I possibly can before the different stages of whatever process we're going into. I just think it gets that really down, and I kind of want to throw it in your court because through talking with you, that sounds like that's a very big thing for you too, is that you're educating your clients continuously of what they can expect. Correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We have a great process over here at Guidant. I'm on the front end. I'm in business development and I develop relationships. And when leads come through those relationships, I'm going to qualify them for ROBS, make sure they're okay. And then they move on to a senior consultant who's the subject matter expert. And we've got some very sharp men and women in that role here at Guidant. And that's the person that is going to take them on the very deep dive of the topic and handle their technical questions, handle or give them direction towards tax type questions. um, all of our clients here do get an hour of outside counsel, a third party not related to us, to kind of discuss the ROBS and how this is how this is landing them structurally and financially in their business.
All right.
Um, I lost my thought there.
Oh,
Sorry,
that's okay.
I'm old.
Well, no, you're not old. Don't say that. We're always going to be
I
young.
am.
Never,
I'm
never
a
use,
grandma.
never
I'm
say
allowed
you're
to make
old.
these mistakes.
I'm going to be 85, and I'm not going to say I'm old. That's how you stay. That's how you
Okay.
stay young and youthful. So you keep, and if your thought comes back to you, just go ahead and say
Okay.
it. But
Okay.
you keep mentioning, or you've mentioned a few times about it being an you guys a lot of times it's SBA, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an SBA loan. They
Does
can take
not.
their entire money that they have in their retirement and use that as an acquisition without an SBA lender. Correct?
Absolutely. So, the top three reasons I see people using ROBS: number one, clearly equity injection. Number two, post-close liquidity. Number three, my guy doesn't want an SBA loan, doesn't want to be in a loan, or his business or the borrower, no disrespect, we've been through some stuff in the last few years, don't qualify for an SBA loan. This is very common with my restaurateurs. A startup, no name, non franchise, no brand restaurant in any town USA is going to have a heck of a time getting financing for that deal. Super risky, no collateral there, no history. So, a lot of times my restaurateurs will come together strictly with retirement funds to get their deal together. And some of them will maintain that ROB structure, and some of them will want to exit out of the ROB structure. We can talk about the reasons why somebody would want to do one or the other.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, again, SBA lending is my world, and the SOP says that when we're using retirement funds as a source of equity in an SBA loan, if there's real estate, it has to be in the C Corp. So the dirt, the building, the business all have to be contained within that C Corp. And everybody on this call is going to understand that's not the historic or traditional way to do a deal like that. If I'm a business owner, heck yeah, I want to own my real estate, the building in my own LLC where I'm the only member, and I get to lease that space to my operating company. But the SBA considers that an inappropriate double dip. And so everything's got to be in the C Corp.
Yeah, and it has to be when you're doing a ROBS. It has to be it has to be a C
It
corp,
has to be a
correct?
C Corp.
It has to be
That's
C.
right. It does have to
And
be a C Corp because of the types of shareholders we need to support there.
and I want to make it very clear for those that are not familiar with ROBS. And if you want to add to this, Suzy, feel free. But I want to make it very clear: it's not a matter of you're doing a ROBS and you're taking the money out and you're buying a business. It's actually you're setting up a C corp. There's paperwork that's involved to make all this happen. But what it is that C corp is now your retirement fund in itself. Correct?
It is. Can I give you a little example? Let's meet Pizza Guy. Okay.
Okay.
And
Yeah. Every business broker out there sold a lot of pizza places, even if they don't do it anymore. They at one time they did. So that's probably the most relatable example you can give.
All right. So Pizza Guy is coming to me with 95,000 in an old IRA, 401k, whatever. In this case, it was an IRA. And our fee is pretty standard across the industry. All the providers charge about the same thing. Is right at 5 grand. I'm just rounding a little bit. Keep the math simple for me. And an interesting point by the IRS, Pizza Guy has to pay our fee himself. He cannot pay our fee out of the money once it gets into the C Corp. So he can't even be reimbursed in cash for the 5,000 he pays us.
He can't
What he
expense is
will
what you're saying. He
receive,
can't expense it through the
what
corporation.
I'm saying, that's right.
Okay.
But what he is going to receive is an in-kind stock exchange. Pizza Guy just got $5,000 worth of stock attributed to him individually. And we've established a C Corp now. We've established a 401k plan. He's opened his accounts. And now he's going to roll his 95,000 from his old IRA into his new 401k. And that's a qualified rollover, plan to plan. No tax, no penalty. And now Pizza Guy's got money in his 401k account, and there's 95,000 there. He decides to invest all 95,000 into his C Corp. Right there, that shell of a C Corp, hadn't done anything yet, is worth $100,000. I've got two shareholders. Pizza Guy, the individual, owns 5% of his business, representing the 5,000 he brought over the 100,000 of worth. And Pizza Guy Inc., 401k, for benefit of Pizza Guy, owns 95% of the business, representing the 95,000 that came over the 100,000 of worth. Now, that's a pretty easy split. It's not always pretty like that. But generally, the plan is going to own the lion's share of stock in most every case.
Gotcha.
So some people get confused and they hear that 95 to 5% split and they think that for every dollar that walks in the pizza shop, 95 cents goes immediately into the plan. And that is incorrect. It's a long term investment. It's just like the stock market, right? Where it becomes interesting for Pizza Guy is he can choose to exit out of this structure. Maybe he wants to go to that eligible passive company being separate from the operating company example we gave earlier. Very common with restaurateurs who want to exit. And how to get out of this structure is we've got to eliminate the 401k plan as a shareholder. Most of my clients that exit early will take post-tax dollars from the operation of the business, put those dollars up into the plan for their future retirement benefit, and that retires their shares down into treasury, corporate treasury. As the 401k is decreasing, the percentage of ownership of the individual pizza guy is increasing as the other shareholder. At whatever point in time, some people are very aggressive. Some people do it in drips and drabs. Some people are so aggressive they may go to the bank after they've got pretty financials for a few years and say, hey, can I have my SBA loan now? Sure. They may use those loan proceeds to eliminate the 401k as a shareholder. But once there's no more shares owned by the 401k, we take the dollars in the plan, roll them out into IRAs, one for each participant, based on their participation, unhook and dissolve the 401k. Now we're no longer constrained to a C Corp, and we're no longer constrained from having an eligible passive company and an operating company, meaning the real estate in one entity and the operating company in a separate entity.
Okay.
So that is a very common path for people who have a deal that involves real estate. Okay, so that's my assisted living facilities, my daycare facilities, the bougiest of bougie, dog palaces, those kind of deals.
So, we've been talking about buyers acquiring a business, through a ROBS, but what should we know as business brokers when it comes to if we're working with a seller that wants to sell, I know a business owner that wants to sell their business and they have a
I just
ROBS.
learned this week. Yeah, I just learned this week. I can't believe it. All these years of doing this is the first time I came across the situation. So I'm used to the buyer
Yeah,
also.
right.
But
Me
so
too.
I'm working with this guy and he's buying a business, but the seller had used a ROBS as well. And the deal, my referral partner, the deal included the seller carrying a piece back. You can't do that with a ROBS.
Hmm.
We can't make the ROBS function being a lending institution or lending corporation in any way, shape, or form.
So no owner financing
So
if the seller's got a ROBS.
that's right.
Okay.
And that's the first time I bumped up against that. But the lender, she's a hero. Anyway, she's a deal maker. She went ahead and just removed that requirement. It's a beautiful deal otherwise. So
Well, it's kind of nice from the seller's perspective is that's the excuse is, hey, I can't do any owner financing. I've got a ROB
you're right.
situation going on. So
That's right.
that's the best excuse you can have is my hands are tied. I can't do it.
Now I have another scenario where an old ROBS, one of my referral partners called me last year and said, listen, I got a guy that wants to borrow money for a building, a warehouse. His business is doing great, but he used a ROBS in 2016 to start his business. Does it still, that rule about real estate, I'm going to tell you what it's called. It's called eligible passive company / operating company, or EPCOC. So does the EPCOC restriction still apply even though this guy did his ROBS back in 2016? I said, well, does the 401k still have ownership in the company? hmm I said, well, then yes, it still applies. He would have to put that real estate in his C Corp. And my referral partner's like, no, 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 he doesn't want to do that. And I said, okay, well, how much dollar wise does the plan own in the corporation? It was only like 42,000. It wasn't much at all. And so what my partner did was loan him enough money to exit out of the ROBS and do the deal, which was the land and construction.
Hmm. Great.
So
Is
an
there
old
anything
ROBS
else?
can be
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
problematic sometimes. An old ROBS can be problematic sometimes.
Hmm. So is there anything else that you think us brokers need to know, business brokers need to know when it comes to selling a business
Oh
that
yeah,
has a ROBS that ROBS in place?
those are the two. Those are the two things that I know.
Okay.
Those are the two main things.
And so a lot of times you hear, ROBS 401 or 401k ROBS or whatever. But what are all the retirement accounts that somebody can use to do a ROBS?
Absolutely. I'm happy to tell you that. The shorter list is what you cannot use.
Okay.
And that's Roth IRA, taxes already been prepaid, there's no benefit,
Hmm.
and an inherited IRA, unless you inherited it from your spouse. No one but your spouse. So generally, I just tell people no inherited IRAs.
Okay.
But 401ks, 403bs, 457 plans, thrift savings plans,
Regular
pensions,
IRAs.
annuities, regular IRAs, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, uh, traditional IRAs, rollover IRAs.
What about cash balance profit
Now,
sharing
when it,
plans? 401, do you know 401k cash
yeah,
balance
profit
profit
sharing
sharing
plans as
plans?
well.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
All right. Excellent.
So, but the thing to know here is, first of all, we want to make sure you're accessing enough. 50,000 is where this process makes sense. So if my client's accessing at least $50,000, and maybe it's not all in one account, maybe the wife has some and he has some, together it's 50 and that's fine. That's a pretty small size deal though. That's really not in the world in that you and I either one live in.
Hmm.
Most of my people, I'm in Texas, it's a pretty rich market, are going to be accessing between, 200 and $600,000, honestly, and leverage that against their retirement plan. So the bigger the deal, the more impactful it becomes. The more money that's being accessed gives the client a better opportunity to buy a business that is of legacy size, is what I call a business like that.
And you're talking $200,000 to $600,000 being pulled out of retirement plan to do this ROBS and to acquire a business. That's a good chunk of money, because now you can buy a business for 2 million, 5 million, $6 million
That's what I'm
if
saying.
you
That's a
if you
legacy
leverage that.
size business now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're getting into
You got
some.
something that's going somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, you do. How does ROBS affect the person's retirement savings in the long run?
Well, we talked about how we exit out of a ROBS
Hmm.
by before we sell our business. And we also have the flip side to that. And this is what I think is the biggest impact in all of that. Sorry, that's another prospect really wants us to get signed up today. um, but so let's go back to Pizza Guy, and let's say he didn't have real estate, he didn't care, he just left his ROBS like it was. He was happy. His plan owned 95%, he owns 5%, and a buyer eventually walks in and offers him $1 million for his business. It gives him the opportunity to tax defer $950,000 into his retirement vehicle for his future benefit.
Wow.
And he's only going to pay capital gains tax on the 50,000 or 5% in this example that hits his pocket. He just sold a business for $1 million and paid capital gains on 50,000.
Wow.
That's a home
Wow.
run.
Suzy, that's huge. That's really big.
It's a home run. Yeah, it
And
is.
is that according, because he owned the 5% and then it was the 95%. So as he starts to gain more interest in the company personally, and that other share from his retirement program goes down, and it kind of doing a crisscross like that. So if it was 70-30, then he would get $700,000 tax
Exactly.
deferred. Wow. Suzy, that's
I
incredible.
know. That's big. I know. And then another thing that's pretty cool, I guess when the tax code changed in 2018 and took C Corp to a flat 21% tax rate,
Hmm.
and people don't, I find people every day that don't believe that still holds to this day, but it does. They figured it would go away, but it hasn't yet. When that happened, I got less pushback about a C Corp. It was hard product to sell. People,
Hmm.
no, 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 too much taxes in a C Corp. And
Because of the double taxation, I just want to let the audience
well,
know,
that's the thing. It's not so
if you,
much double taxation, it was a higher tax rate. But
yeah.
people do say that. The first thing out of everybody's mouth is double tax. And that's something that can be managed and controlled. My guy's going to take his compensation as a salary. It's required. He's
Right.
got to be a W-2 employee. Only W-2 employees can participate in 401k plans. So his salary is an expense to the corporation. Um, if he's not paying dividends, then it's not an issue. If he does pay dividends, it's taxed at the corporate level, and you pick it up on your tax return, you get taxed again. You bet your bottom that's double tax. And so I was always kind of against it. But Keith Tracy is one of our senior consultants here. He is a smart guy. And he pointed this out to me. Let's say you had 10,000. We're going back to Pizza Guy. We had 10,000 on the table at the end of the year, and we wanted to pay it out in dividends. Well, it's going to go to each shareholder in their proportionate share. So 9,500 of that is going into your 401k account. So a way you can stack your 401k that's different than a contribution. It's different than a stock buyback. That's a way you can fatten up your 401k that you typically could not.
Right.
And so if you're older like me and you're really wanting to kind of catch up, having some money when you're really ready to go fishing, it's kind of a cool opportunity.
That is super cool. That is super cool. I want to go back a few minutes ago because it's been running through my head, and I just want to ask you because a few minutes ago you had mentioned that you're in Texas, and most of the people out there is a lot of wealth out there where you're at, and they're pulling 200 to 600,000 out there. You're in Texas, but you can do deals in any of the states, correct?
Yep. My last state to acquire was Alaska. I finally had a deal in Alaska 2 years ago.
So all this you've done in all the states, including
Everything.
Hawaii.
Lots of business in Hawaii.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. Are there any specific types of businesses or industries out there that it's less advantageous to do a ROBS with?
Well, you heard me say earlier that 50,000 is where this makes sense,
Yeah.
right? And so for that, you're thinking about a really small franchise concept, a guy in a truck kind of thing, uh, size business. I, I think you want to be careful with putting all your eggs into such a small basket. I'm more
Right.
comfortable when my client is combining their retirement funds with financing, some of their money, some of other people's money, the old adage. I'm more comfortable with that. And my client that makes me happiest is he's only going to use a portion of those retirement funds and not all of them, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So maybe he's got, 600,000 available to him. He might only deploy 300,000 for his deal. But
This.
industries, you asked me about industries, just, tiny things. I mean, the things I do the most of is anything wellness, anything beauty, anything pet related, anything child related. Tons and tons and tons of businesses surrounding that.
So it's more of just making sure that it's a good business for that particular buyer, and the buyer has the buyer should make sure they have the experience and expertise to operate that type of a business, and the normal
Right,
is
and
it
they
a
need
good
a good
industry
business
to be
broker like
in,
you. They
and
need somebody helping them. Yeah.
yeah,
That's why they need business brokers. That's a difficult decision to make on your own if you don't have experience making those kinds of decisions.
yeah. All right.
So they need professionals like y'all.
And this might be an off the wall question, but I just want to ask, and maybe it doesn't apply. But are there any
I'm
restrictions
prepared.
on how the funds can be used once they rolled over into the new business? I mean, obviously they probably have to be used for the business, but is there anything else
You
that's
do. So
restricting that?
that's the only restriction. The IRS doesn't want you doing this and buying an RV and running off into the
Buying a
sunset.
Mercedes Benz and
It's not allowed. And other things that aren't allowed. No collectibles. So no art, no wine, no rugs, no. I mean, if you're a wine store, that's one thing. I'm talking about being a collector. No lending institution. You can't be a lender of any kind. Um, any purient business, like anything that you couldn't get an SBA loan for, like a strip club or whatnot. Dispensary.
okay, cool. So how can us business brokers, how can we be more effective in integrating, a ROBS into our into our offering and the guidance with potential buyers? How can we, you know,
Great
talk
question.
about that? Yeah.
So nobody is going to come into a broker's office and say, I need a ROBS plan. So they don't know it exists, right? And the only way you can really get a feeling of whether there's an opportunity is by taking a look at the personal financial statement. If my broker sees that there's some retirement funds there, just put a pin in that for a second. And then once we're seriously talking about a deal, we start exploring where the financing is going to come from. That's when it can come up. Hey, you've got X amount of dollars in your 401k. Did you know you could use this and no tax, no penalty?
Mm-hmm.
Or an IRA or whatnot. So that's when it needs to come in. It needs to be above 50,000, and it also needs to be available that I can handle those questions. Um, Generally, available means prior employer, but not always. So
Okay.
let's say if I worked at one company, company A, for a number of years and participated in their 401k, and then I left company A for company B and I rolled company A's 401k into company B's, that portion can come out. So I could still be employed and roll out. Or I could be 59 and a half and still be employed and be able to roll out. So just because you're still employed there is not an automatic no that you can't use those funds.
Yeah. So yeah, when I see Suzy, sometimes because I'm in Florida and we do co-brokering down here, and once in a while I'll see another broker be like, your buyer, they don't have much cash on hand, da 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 da, and I'm like, yeah, but the retirement money is there, and I think going back to your point, when you're looking at the financial statement, you don't just zero in on the cash, look at those retirement funds because they can definitely
That's
use
right.
them,
That's
some
right. I know people aren't used to doing it because generally we can't get into that money. Even the IRS can't. But using the strategy of a ROBS plan, you can access
and it's
that.
been drilled through so many people's heads. It's been drilled through all of our heads that you get penalized really bad, and taxed really bad if you pull it out before 59 and a half. So a lot of times I think brokers and buyers, they kind of, they write down on their financial net worth statement, hey, this is what I got in retirement, but they're not thinking they can actually use it. And I do want to say that, this is people's retirement, savings. They've probably spent their entire life or may have spent their entire life, putting the money in there. So I don't know if they should be pulling out all their money out of there. Maybe pull out, some of it, and they've got to be really sure. Just like when you're not doing it, you got to make sure that you're really buying a business that you're going to be successful in.
That's right. That's exactly right.
What are some
So
things that? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go
well,
ahead,
my
Suzy.
prudent speech to my prospects is, they're always like, when should I do the ROBS? A, make sure you have a deal,
Mm-hmm.
put together. And if there's a loan, have somewhat of a nod from your lender before we get started on the ROBS. It's a 30-day process in most cases from engagement to dollars in hand, as long as everybody's staying on top of their pony, including the client, getting things turned in time and whatnot. But I think it's most prudent to wait until you have a deal together. And if there is a loan involved, you have pretty good assurance that you're going to get that loan before you begin. Now, it makes it complicated because to fill in your SBA application, you're not going to have a corporate name yet because you haven't engaged us and we haven't formed anything. But you can explain to your lender what's going on.
And they shouldn't form their corporation on their own, or you should not advise them as a business broker to form their
Never,
corporation if
ever,
it's going to do a ROBS. They need to
never,
talk to
yeah,
you, and you guys need to set that corporation
yeah,
up. And it's got to be a
that's
C
right,
corp, like
that's
you
right,
said. So if an SBA loan's involved, and I know we've already talked about it, you don't necessarily have to do an SBA loan, but I would imagine most people that are pulling their funds out are doing SBA loans. Is that fair to say,
90%
Suzy?
of my deals, 90% of my deals.
90% of your deals. So how much time does it add if it adds any time to the deal if you're doing an SBA loan?
It shouldn't. It shouldn't. If we do that prudent timeline I just gave you, so we know
Mm-hmm.
things are going to flow, even after that point, it's going to take the lender 4 to 6 weeks before we
Yep.
can even think about a close, and that's the amount of time we need. So
Yep.
it works out.
And it sounds like they should really start to roll up their sleeves with this, because I would imagine that if someone's going to do a ROBS, I want to put them in contact with you,
Early.
before the offer, just so that they understand, the ins and outs and kind of what they can expect, and the pros and the cons, and they kind of get an idea of what the ROBS is about. But it sounds like from talking with you that they should really be rolling up their sleeves and getting into things once there's been a term sheet executed with the lender.
Exactly right.
The lender says, "Yeah, I like the buyer and the seller. I like this marriage, and we're going to proceed." That's the best time you really roll up the sleeves. Correct?
I agree. I agree. I
Mm.
agree. And then we can also do kind of a stutter start. So we're pretty confident everything's going to go, and we can roll the money into the retirement account and just hold right there. And if something happens in the 11th hour, which we've all been around long enough to know that it can happen,
Yeah.
and the deal falls apart, We're not having to buy shares of stock back again. He can roll that money back into an IRA. It never came as the corporation. It's unwound very easily without any cost to them.
And that money can never touch their personal bank account. That has to.
Oh Lord, no, or the corporate account.
They
But now
need the buyer. If you're a broker and you're working with someone who wants to do a ROBS, you really got to make sure that you're getting, you're turning it over to a professional like Suzy to make sure that everything's checked off.
And
So
luckily, I'm not the one in charge of all of our clients. We have people that take on the role as their onboarding professional to get them through the process and to carry them through the rest of the life cycle of their plan. Whether it's, they exit before they sell or they exit at the point of sale, which is what I'd be doing if I was pizza guy. I'd wait to the end.
going back to the conversation of how brokers should approach the subject with a buyer, and I think it comes down to common sense. You're looking at the financial statement and they've got a lot of money in retirement, maybe not so much money in cash. They can access that. Or is there anything that you think that we should stay away from saying or talking about, or is there any what kind of discussions do you think we should be having with those potential
If you
buyers?
uncover it and they, say, I would say, do you know that you can do this? Would you be interested in exploring it? And then an email introduction to me is just really all we need to do. And then I will always keep my brokers updated with what's going on with our candidates all the way through the point of engagement.
Yeah. For me on things like this, I like to know enough to build to guide somebody and build to have an intelligent conversation with them. But I'm not trying to learn all the ins and outs. I mean, as a business broker, there's so much information that I need to know in the process of selling a business. It's just so many things that we do and so many different details. And obviously, I'm never going to be an expert like you are and your team are in the ROB space. And I'm not going to try to educate myself to the point, because I'll never be able to achieve that, and it would take away from, learning and keep improving as a business broker myself, so I'm like that, I'll if I see that they have a lot of money in retirement and that's a good option for them to go into a ROBS. To me, it's just like a 5-minute conversation, give them saying, hey, this
Right.
is what you can
Yeah.
do. It's just saying the very basics, but saying, if that's something you're interested in, you need to talk to Suzy or you need to talk to whoever, that they want to talk to about the ROBS.
And
And make sure it's a
I love.
reputable company. If you're not going to use Suzy. But if you're not going to use Suzy, make sure you use a really good, reputable
Right.
company.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. All right.
So the other thing I keep failing to mention, you said details. I'm like, well, I skipped a big one. I pay a commission. So if a referral moves to an engagement, that's $1,000 commission to the referrer.
Oh, wow. All right. Excellent. Excellent. And you should disclose that, by the way, to your buyer and seller if you're going to
Oh yeah,
get that referral. Can you
absolutely.
share maybe some success stories that you've done?
Man, we've had some really, really great businesses, and we've had some epic flameouts. People are going to do what people are going to do. But we've had a very successful jewelry business. This guy is just doing so well. Just tons of them. People that have gone in and exited in such a successful way have set themselves up. In the meantime, they've built up a family that they passed on to their kids, or they've sold on to another person. Just the whole life cycle of a Rob's. I dig it. You know,
Yeah,
it's
I like the whole life cycle too, and before talking to you today, I knew a little bit about ROBS, but, to me, it was always, accessing that money up front,
right.
as an option, a way for them to acquire a business. But gosh, I'm loving it on the back end when
There's
when
a
they
lot
go
of
to sell that
benefits.
business that they're,
Definitely.
putting whatever percentage away, tax deferred, according to how much is left in the retirement
That's right.
program. That's
That's right.
phenomenal. I did not know that. So you
Yeah.
learn something every day. I've been doing this for almost 25 years and I'm still learning stuff. But you know what? You just told me you learned something this week too. So, you
It's
know,
amazing. But I love to learn things. I love people to teach me something I don't know. So that's.
yeah, there's just so much to know all the way around
I
that,
know.
you never stop learning. I don't care if you've been doing this 5 years, 20 years, 50 years, you don't stop learning. And if you do
Well, you
stop learning,
can't. You can't.
you,
I mean, we have to play with AI now because we have to learn it,
you're right. Right.
or we're gonna be
Yeah.
left behind. and I'm going to permanently need a 10-year-old to set my VCR up or something. I don't know.
What changing financial landscapes and regulations do you see that happening in the future with when it comes to ROBS?
It's here to stay. It would take a literal act of Congress for it to change the ERISA law. I don't see that going anywhere in my lifetime.
Okay. With the SBA lending, the rules are constantly changing, constantly, and then they'll issue some new rulings, and then it takes, like, they issued some new rulings in May
Yes, they
9th of
did.
2023, and they were coming out. I think it was August 1st of 2023, and even after they were coming out August 1st, it was still like things were changing and being refined and things like that. When it comes to ROBS, for a ROBS program, does it change a lot? Is it constantly being updated and a lot of changes, or what have you seen over the
No,
years?
no, really, it's not changing a lot. What happened back in 18? Um, they made additions to the SOP that was a checklist of things that had to be reviewed and notated on a file to show that it was a ROBS and what the ongoing strings were. Um, and then with this latest SOP, they call it by name, ROBS. So I was happy about that. Although I don't like the name ROBS because nobody's robbing anybody. It's not illegal to do.
Well, it's an acronym, right? ROBS is an
Yeah, it
acronym,
is.
right? Yeah.
And the acronym stands for Rollover as Business Startup. And I don't like that either because it's also for an acquisition.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Whoever came up with the name was probably like, oh, great.
It
Yeah.
was the
We're all
IRS.
excited.
I can tell you who to blame. No,
Yeah.
no love here.
Yeah. Yeah. None of us are big IRS fans. I don't think anybody is around the world. But
Oh,
my
we can
name's
be
not Jim
grumpy.
Parker. If you're an IRS agent and you're
I,
listening,
it was my mother's car. I wasn't even there.
Exactly. Um, for business brokers, or, well, let me, before I get into that, is there anything that a seller? I mean, we talked about what buyers should basically know, before they talk to you, and we talked a little bit about what us business brokers should be discussing with the buyers. But what should sellers know if the buyer is coming in with with a rob situation?
The most important thing, I think, when there's a ROBS being used is that everybody in the deal understands that this portion of the financing is going to take a 30-day lead time.
Which is going to run concurrent with the SBA process. It's like, because like you said before, because if you do a term sheet, from that term sheet to the time we get to closing, we should
Yeah,
pretty
well,
much be there.
yeah.
How long do the banks typically want the program to be done prior to closing?
Well, the dream is before 24 hours before closing. Sometimes that's not always possible because the very last piece of our documentation happens when the client actually moves his money from the 401k account into the corporate checking account. And that's always the very last thing that happens because while we've been putting things together, money has been moving to get in this direction, right? Um, and when that stock sale happens, there's a lot of important documentation. Stock certificates are drafted, and most importantly, the percentages of ownership are defined. And every lender wants to have that percentage early so they can put it into their notes. And so before I got here, Guidant was pretty testy about not giving that information. You just hit Suzy up. I'll make a little spreadsheet and we can get close to what it's going to be. It may not be to the penny because we're not trading on
Mhm.
that day, but we'll have a good idea of what the percentages of ownership are. But that final piece of the pie doesn't get executed until the money makes its way into the corporation. So it's
And
the
then
last thing on the pie.
then we're still in the situation that if that money has to be transferred into the corporate bank account, we're still in a situation that's when you're going to finish up the last bit of the paperwork. But then does that paperwork still need to go to the attorneys at the lender to review to make sure that everything's good and ready to go? So that would be really tough to finish up 24 hours before closing, right?
Yeah. It never
Yeah.
happens, Jim. It's never happened once.
So what is a good time frame to get the buyer's money over into his or hers new C corp checking account? Like a week
Same,
before?
yeah. That
Okay.
30-day cycle I talked to you about is from
Yeah.
when he engages with us until the money makes its way into his corporate checking account. And so within that 30 days, at the end of that time, he's ready to go to the table, closing table.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that you think us business brokers, buyers, sellers should know when it comes to a ROBS that we haven't covered
You
today?
just have to understand that it is a business with a 401k plan. You got to treat it like a business with a 401k plan. That means that if you eventually have employees that are eligible to participate in the plan, you've got to offer them the opportunity to participate. People lose their minds over that because the automatic assumption is that their participating employees can buy stock in the business through the plan, and that is not a standard plan option. So they can buy stock in whatever you and the financial professional you have handling your 401k account have worked together to choose a handful of options, a mix of risks for you and any employee participant to choose from through that 401k plan going forward.
Public, and that includes publicly traded,
Yeah, it's just be a normal
stock and
401k
mutual
though.
funds
That's
and
right.
things like
That's right.
that.
Yeah.
But you have to offer that to your employees, a retirement program for your employees.
That's right. Once they
And
meet eligibility.
yeah, and the employees, if they decline to do it, it doesn't hurt
That's fine.
anything,
Yeah.
right? You
That's
just probably
fine.
need
Yeah.
to get them to sign off on it and things like that. And if there is anybody out there that's looking to do this, a buyer that's looking to do this, and you're saying, I don't know if I really want to get involved with giving my employees a benefit plan. I'm going to say some of the most successful small businesses that sell for under $5 million. Not all of them offer retirement programs, but some of the best ones that I've seen have offered retirement programs for or plans for their employees because it's taking care of the people. That's how you retain long-term employees. I mean, you just the whole concept for me is a business owner should have is that your employees are not a tool that you use to make money, but it's part of you're helping them, they're helping you, you're working together to make everybody successful that is helping to make that company successful. And those retirement programs I think are I think that's a really great thing to be offering your employees. You want to add anything to that, Suzy?
No, I think it really is great. Not every employee is going to want to participate, but it is a real life 401k. People are like, well, I don't want to match. You don't have to. If you match for one, you got to match for all, but you don't have to match for anybody if you don't want to, you know. So there are things that our consultants can walk you through to tailor it to just what's going to be the best plan for you and your company.
Yeah, no, I think matching is a good route to go, though.
I think it
Personally,
is too. So maybe you've got a situation where husband and wife are coming together on a deal, but he's not really leaving his day job. He's using an IRA instead of his 401k. But anybody who rolls into the 401k and invests into the C Corp has to be a W-2 employee. Whether they're punching the time clock at this office every day or not, they still have responsibility to work X amount of hours in this ROBS business. And he's got to take some of that money and contribute it into the ROBS 401k. The IRS doesn't want to see just one transaction in this 401k plan. Their attitude
yeah.
is you got a 401k plan, use it. So you're required to make somewhat of an annual contribution to that plan for yourself. And when you are participating in more than one 401k plan, like this example I'm giving, the guy at his day job has it, now he's got a ROBS plan that has it. Um, you can only contribute so much, regardless of how many plans you have. It's so much combined. So if you're getting matched at work, tend towards the matching. Just peel off a little bit of um, room for you to take contribution or make contributions into the ROBS 401k as well.
So, what are some resources that a buyer or a buyer or a broker can go to to learn more about a ROBS? You might have instead of just googling it. Do you have any good resources that you can recommend?
Well, guidantfinancial.com.
And we're going to have you give out your contact information in a minute, but
Okay.
is there any other resources that might be good, or
Google,
just
Google,
talking to a professional
SBA.gov,
is the
and
best?
yeah, it's all in there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, go ahead, Suzy. Tell us how people can get a hold of you to learn more or to
Sure, sure.
send clients your way.
Best way to get a hold of me is by email because I'm constantly on the phone. My email is Suzy, Suzy, .Granger, Granger, at guidantfinancial.com. My number is 281-942-0530. That's call or text. And I am a nerd about this. You got any questions? You want to run a scenario? I could talk about this all night and day. So please hit me up. We can get through it.
And seriously, Suzy and I have had several conversations on she's just a wonderful person. She does have a passion about this industry, the ROBS industry, and she's just a wonderful, really good person. Her heart's really into it to do the right thing for the people that are involved with the transaction, and she's extremely knowledgeable. So, if you are using or you currently talking to buyers about ROBS or you plan to do so in the future, seriously consider Suzy. And Suzy, I really appreciate you joining us today
Oh, my
to give us
pleasure.
your
Thank you. What a
insight and
great
your
opportunity.
expertise.
All right. Thanks so much, Jim.
You're very welcome. Hey, and so all you listeners out there, my fellow business brokers, if you don't mind, just if you could like my channel, like the video, comment on this video, and share it if you want. And please subscribe. That'd be great. That way you're not going to miss any videos in the future. And it also helps me out as well. And just so you know, I don't get paid for this or anything. I just love doing it. I love being educated. I love talking to professionals in the industry, but it does help me out if you do subscribe. But I appreciate you guys joining today, and I wish you guys all the best. Until next time, take care.